Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. I am Maxwell and I'm joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you doing today?
Maxwell, I'm doing awesome. It's great to get a chance to. This is like the longest break since I've been back that we've had in recording a show. So it's nice to get back into the swing of things. I'm excited after a fun-filled weekend of defending and I know Rucker feels the same way, but if I was going to pick one player in the NBA right now to start a franchise with, I'm picking Anthony Edwards. And I have been defending myself against some very passionate Victor Wembanyama fans. So other than that, the weekend's been fun, man. How about you?
It's been good. It's been good. I'm on the Victor side of that equation. I completely understand the Ant love, especially after game one.
And we got a salute to the Sickos here from
there we go.
The streets are buzzing. Appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in here live.
Yeah, we always appreciate people joining us live. Feel free, if you are here live, join us in the chat, comment in the chat, ask us questions.
Hit that like button, too, while you're...
Yeah, hit the like button. Do all that jazz. It makes the show a lot more fun. We got Dirty Dancer. Always love to see him in here. One of the goats of the basketball podcast, like chat genre in general. Yeah. Like he's a very, very good thinker. Poses a lot of interesting questions. Always good to have him in here.
Absolutely.
Or her. I don't know what Dirty Dancer is. But yeah, it could be anything. So Dirty Dancer, always good to have you. But yeah, we are going to do, Stephen came up with a very good name for this, by the way. Full credit to Stephen. The Big Board Pick Apart, where we submitted consensus boards again this week for the No Ceilings composite board that we publish on the site. That board that you see on the NoCeilingsNBA.com website is a composite, basically, of everyone on our staff, their individual boards. Stephen and I on today's show looked at each other's boards and said, hey, here are some guys that have been risers for us. And here are some guys who are like, wait a minute, what are you doing with that guy that high? Sell me on this. Talk me through it. Both just to kind of, I guess, disagree with each other for fun a little bit, but also to kind of understand, like, hey, am I missing something? Because I think, especially this year, like, I feel like my evaluations are going to be a little bit more down to the wire than they've been in past years. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to contextualize. And ultimately, I think, like, the lottery order, it might even affect, like, where I rank guys. If it seems like guys are going to fall in certain spots, I might like them a little bit more. It's going to be a really interesting year. But we're going to start off talking about some risers on our recent boards. Yours is fascinating. We're going to get to him in a little bit.
Yeah.
I think in now, like, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. I'm really excited to talk about that one. But we're going to start off with one of mine, which is Jaylon Tyson. I don't know that I'm going to keep him this high. My gut says I'm probably going to lower him back down a little bit, but I have Jaylon Tyson at around 15 right now. It feels rich, like, as I say it out loud, but here's where I'm at. Jaylon Tyson is a guy that, as I'm watching the playoffs right now, it just feels like you have to be able to dribble, pass, shoot, attack the rim, and, like, have some sauce. Like, these guys that just shoot, or these guys that, like, just lack a shot, or guys that are very one-dimensional in terms of how they see the floor, how they play, are having a really hard time. Like, you have to be able to do a lot of things competently. And I have some gripes at Jaylon Tyson, which we'll get to in a minute, but we've at least seen him do all of those things. And this is a year where it's a lot of guys where it's like, hey, this guy's kind of just a shooter, or hey, this guy's a really good playmaker, but there's no shot, or this guy's way behind the curve athletically. Like, Jaylon Tyson, he's got a little bit of everything, and those guys can get you in trouble. Like, sometimes, sometimes the guy is more Wendell Moore than Josh Hart, per se. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes guys that stuff the stat sheet end up just, like, none of it scales up. I think with Jaylon Tyson, there's a lot to buy into. I love, first off, how he gets to the basket. He's really tough through contact. He changes speeds with the ball really well. He's got good dribble moves. He's got some shake, just tough to telegraph when he attacks the basket. And I think he is, like, a real deal shooter. Like this year, he was 37% or 36%, only like 37% of catch and shoot threes. But last year, he was at 40.2%. I've always liked how it looks. Was almost 80% at the free throw line. I like him as a shooter. And then the passing, I think, is where I came around on him a little bit. I do like how he sees the corners when he goes downhill. I like that he can live dribble a pass with both hands. I like that at times. I think where he did better on my final film dive than where I anticipated is he does a much better job of like slowing down and playing off of 2 feet while facing up. And he wasn't in the mid post as much as I was kind of dinging him for. I do think he knows how to play inefficient spots on the floor and remain under control. The pull up is smooth. He's capable of making tough shots. And I think ideally you put him in a situation where he doesn't have to take tough shots all the time and he can just kind of figure that stuff out. Love this point. Here, Tyson self-created 30% of his 3-point attempts. That's the thing, too. If you look at synergy, a lot of the pull-ups, like just in general, like the fact that he was moderately efficient. Again, but like we talked about with Dalton Connect, a very high usage wing player, extremely high usage this past year. Yeah, 30.1 usage rate, which is higher than you'd like. And we got to remember, too, this Cal team was rough before he got there. He made his team better. Defensively, I'm not as sold. I think he physically has the tools to like body people up. I don't think he's going to be toast on that end of the floor. I think he's a little heavy on his feet. I don't love the directional changes. I think he can be a hair behind the play sometimes. I do wonder how much that changes in a lower usage role. And I also think it's a situation where maybe in a better like overall defensive team construct, it looks better. Like maybe, you know what I mean? Like we talked about like Dalton Connect, like not to just keep comparing the two, but with that infrastructure around him, I wonder if it looks a little bit better where Cal, like the pieces like individually go down the roster. Is this guy a good defender? Is this guy a good defender? It's a lot more no's than at Tennessee. My other gripe with him is so the passing has its moments. The passing can also be pretty rough. Like there are passes where I'm just like, wait, what was that? Like there was a play, gosh, what was the game I was watching yesterday? It was one of his like moderate performance games. Like it was a game where he was okay. There was a ball screen coverage where they were hard hedging, and he like threw a pass like right into the hands of the big man that was hedging, and it was like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, where were you going with that type thing?
Really, yeah. Like there's moments where the comp I made when I talked to Chuck on Chucking Darts is like there's moments where he feels a little Denzel Valentine to me. And like that is my concern is like, is this guy a stat sheet stuffer that has these warts? And then maybe in a reduced role, it does work. Like maybe you put him in a reduced role, he's shooting, he's attacking, he's finishing above the rim. Or is this a case of like occasionally he just makes these decisions and a coach yanks him? Like, especially if the defense isn't there. Like that's where I think it can go wrong. And that's why I still think I'll probably end up with him a bit lower than where I have him now. But just watching the playoffs, like everyone has to be able to do everything. And I feel like with Jaylon, the fact that we've at least seen him do all of it gives me a lot more confidence than just like hoping a guy figures out how to do some of the stuff that they look pretty darn bad at. So that's where I'm at with Jaylon is it's kind of just like you, at a certain point, like I've at least seen him do it. Maybe he can scale it down. So I know you've liked Jaylon for a long time. How are you feeling about him and kind of what range do you have him in?
So I have him at 13 now. Around the 22nd, I had him at 14. And then, pre-draft, I wrote about him. I feel like I've talked about this a lot. I've kind of had my eye on Jaylon Tyson as a guy who could potentially rise throughout the season.
Mm-hmm. You liked him preseason quite a bit.
Yeah, I liked him preseason. And I was thinking like maybe this guy sneaks into the second round, kind of like how I did with KJ Simpson. And KJ Simpson is kind of proving me right. Like Jaylon has blown my expectations way out of the water. But I have him at 12 now, and I'm starting to, and this is going to be a cheap little plug, so just bear with me. But for the No Ceiling Plus members, you can see all of our big boards like numerically. And one thing that I'm starting to add is I'm doing little scouting reports, and I'm actually like it's a clickable link where I'm putting like things that I like about him, things that I don't like, some notable metrics, and all of that. For Jaylon, the things that stands out is just the scoring efficiency. And Maxwell, you hit the nail on the head. Like Cal did not have a lot of other people around him to where he was kind of doing a lot, and he was doing it efficiently. Now, I feel like we can kind of pick apart like the role that he has at California, but I feel like being picked at 12 in this year's draft, like you're going to go up and you're going to basically be a specialist at, a couple of different areas. And I think what helps Jaylon is that he can shoot, whether it's on his own behalf or like on the catch and shoot. He competes on the glass like a maniac.
Yeah,
like he has very high rebounding numbers and competes on the offensive glass. So to me, like that's more telling, where I feel like you can stumble at his height and his athleticism in the college level. You can stumble into defensive rebounding, but that offensive rebounding is an indicator of his athleticism and his motor. I think that he competes on both ends. I like his scoring mentality. And although the passing can wax and wane, he's not a tunnel vision guy. I feel like he does a really good job of keeping his head up and his eye surveying the floor for the most part until the ball actually goes in the hoop. And the biggest concern that I have for him and how his game translates up isn't so far as much as like the playmaking, but he doesn't drive very often. His drive numbers are actually pretty low. And he favors, I think it's his left side. I have to go back and look, but he's kind of like one side dominant on his drive.
He likes to go right a lot. Right. Like he goes way more often than left.
And sometimes you can see like 55-45 splits, things like that. But he has a pretty like disparaging, like right side favoring drive percentage. So
it was also that was like one thing that stood out too, is that like Cal, other than like Celestine, they didn't have a lot of like, oh, that guy's a shooter. So it was a little bit like, I know we're talking about Dalton Connect a lot, but it was a little bit like Connect too, where it's like, okay, when you are one of the premier shooters, it cramps your spacing when you're the guy that attacks. Like that Karis LeVert comp from
the Dirty Dancer.
That's a good one.
And that kind of answers like the D. Stephen question: how is he as a defender? He's getting Karis LeVert comparison, so he could be serviceable, I guess. But you're not like he's an underrated defender. We don't talk enough about his defensive, technique and his footwork and stuff like that. And insert the typical, does a lot offensively, shouldering much of the creation and things like that. So how much effort are we looking for him to exert on the defensive end, things like that? I think the tools are there, and a lot of times we kind of lose sight on that, where tools are just as important as production for college players on the defensive side going up a level, right? So if we see a guy who is, especially he's active on the glass too, so I think that helps, right? So someone who's active on the glass and shoulders a lot of offensive creation burden for his position, I think he'll be able to focus a little bit more on the defensive end, but I'm not sitting here going to proclaim him as like an all defensive type of player or anything like that.
I think there's like enough that you can think he'll be fine. Like I mentioned earlier, he uses his body well, like really good at stifling penetration on that front. He's physically strong, so like he's not going to be some of the teams just plow through. Really,
he plays kind of small though. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't play like more forwardy. He plays more guardy, which I think does help him because he's quick. And he's long, so I think that'll help him with like ones and twos, maybe some threes. But I'm not saying like he's super scalable to where you can run him like small ball four or anything like that at the next level.
I have a similar concern with him and almost like Dylan Jones in a sense. Like when it feels like when they're on bigger guys, like they just don't like use their like. In Tyson's case, it's like he just doesn't use the fact that he can jump. Like a lot of Jalen's blocks to me felt like they were more like weak side rim help, or like a guy got an offensive rebound and isn't anticipating Tyson getting there on the putback. I think he had like some nice communication, like stuff like on film. It seemed like he was talking a decent amount. Fun question here: Jaylon Tyson or Devin Carter higher? I'm a Devin Carter guy personally. I
got Jaylon higher.
Okay, I like Devin Carter.
And I love Devin.
Like I think Devin Carter is excellent. And I understand like if Devin Carter doesn't shoot, like suddenly he might just be Shaq Harrison. Like I understand that that's like a scary outcome,
but way smaller.
But I really buy Devin Carter. Like I buy like the size, the toughness, another exceptional rebounder for his position.
Motor. Sure.
I think the passing stuff like needs work. Like he's a little bit inaccurate with his passes sometimes, but I think he can like settle down and figure that out. Love the improvements that he made this offseason, like the shot. I think he's like a very good version of like a 3-and-D guard. Measurements are going to be really important for him. Like if he measures short, I might change my stance on this. But I think Devin Carter, because of how bulky he is, he's going to be able to guard twos. So like,
could he be Derek White, like level type of player?
I think Derek White's like
perspective.
I think Derek White's like a little more nimble.
Yeah,
but I think he has a chance to be a lot better than like the D'Anthony Melton, Javon Carter kind of guys that he gets comped to.
So somewhere in between,
somewhere
like
between like, yeah, or even like, it's tough to say today because like a lot of people are raving about like Jalen Suggs today, but like a similar type of role to that.
Jalen,
yeah. So that's kind of where I'm seeing him. But yeah, Jaylon Tyson, I think it's just like one of those guys you watch the playoffs and it's like, yeah, you at least got to try on a guy who can do this stuff. But I was like mentioning earlier, like the paint gets really packed at times because they have a lack of shooting. So I think that
they got AMAC as their big man. So
yeah, I do think that he did a really good job of getting the basket in pick and roll settings though. So I'm hoping that it's a situation where when the floor is a little bit more open, the attacking and driving stuff looks better. Like it looks more like it does out of ball screens than it does off of spot ups.
For sure. Yeah, I like him, man. Like he's a riser for me. And this is our opening segment where we're going to talk about our risers. We're going to kind of do like some help me out. I feel like you and I were watching a lot of the same player when we're watching Jaylon Tyson. It's just how much do you kind of value that player type within this class and like how translatable is what we're seeing him do at Cal this year to the NBA? I'm in favor of like a lot of the stuff that he's doing at Cal, but if you go back and look at some of the Texas Tech stuff where he wasn't so much of the creator, like you kind of see him more of that prototypical 3-and-D role. And I think the truth is probably going to lie somewhere in between both of those film, like what he did at Texas Tech and some of what he did here at Cal, obviously, like all players do. But I don't know, man. Like I'm buying him right now. I'm continuing to go through deep dives and actually develop scouting reports. And as I went through, I think I'm at like 14 now. I felt more comfortable putting him over some of the other players. Like one we're going to talk about here in a little bit on the show, but I feel comfortable with him right now. I'm not sitting here saying like he could be like a top 10 dark horse or anything like that, but kind of late lottery to early 20s. I think that's a very logical outcome for, 6'7", 215 pounds, very athletic wing player who can shoot and defend and rebound. Like you're going to find a place,
Sure. Let's move on to your guy. Cause I'm like fascinated for this one. And you've done a lot more on him than I have. So really want to let you take the lead here. You brought up Jarin Stevenson from Alabama. Where do you have him first off? And what are you seeing? Because you just got the G League Elite Camp invitation. So we've had a lot of these guys that are like water testers where it's like, you kind of know they're not actually staying in the draft. Like they're testing the waters for like, you know, they're going back to school. Jarin Stevenson might not be one of those guys. Like he's got the Elite Camp invite, which generally teams are giving more to guys that they think are going to stay in. So what are you seeing here?
Yeah, so on I want to give a shout out to Rich Thaman, who does like the community mock drafts. You and I are pretty regular participants within there. Just kind of messing around. I took him at 36 to see what people would say. And no one acted like surprised at all that I took him that high. I actually took him over Hunter Salas, who I love a lot. But yeah, I was able to get Hunter like way later in the second round anyway, but that's another story. So Jarin is a forward out of Alabama. And he is the archetype of someone who just feels like that type of player that is going to creep up boards. Like, and it seems like it's almost Alabama who has like these types of players, right? Who are big, long, very fluid type athletes. He doesn't have like the sexiest numbers. He's 48th on my board right now, somewhere between like 48 to 45. So when I'm saying he's like my biggest riser, I'm not saying like draft this guy in the first round, but I'm taking someone who really no conversation at all on him. And now it's like, I would definitely take this guy in the second round. A couple draft cycles ago, we started hearing that word pre-draft, and that was like, there was like a big to-do over that word. Jarin Stevenson to me feels like a pre-draft guy, where you're looking at a guy who's 6'10", about 215 pounds, very solid free throw rate, 28.3 on 41.3 minute percentage and 15.3 usage. So when he was touching the ball, he was putting pressure on the defense. Outstanding rebounding rates. When you watch him on the film, it's clear, man, that he is going to be an NBA player. It's just a matter of when, and I think that in a draft class like this, where we're looking at players and we're kind of murky on projections and things like that, I'm watching the playoffs right now and I'm watching Minnesota, right? And I'm seeing my guy Jaden McDaniels do some damage. Like, I don't know if it's going to be too outlandish that he could be kind of like a subsect of a McDaniels archetype in the NBA, because if you look and see what he did like from the month of March on, and I know that's like a segmented part of a very segmented season, he shot 35% from deep, and the shot looks nice. Very quick release, very repeatable, has some good range on it. I think that he can do a lot, man. Like he gets involved as screeners. He's a good finisher, has nice, good hands. He's very mobile and fluid as a player. So he's 6'10", but he moves like an NBA wing, right? He will be 18 on draft night, so you have a long runway with him. And I just think that he shows good help instincts on defense. Some of his tendencies do need to get cleaned up, but you're talking about a guy who didn't get a whole heck of a lot of playing time on a very deep Alabama team. I'm just saying, if this is the draft where we're considering a guy like Ulrich Chomsky, like in the second round, like why would I not want to look at a guy like Jarin Stevenson? And I got a pretty cool endorsement from Raphael Barlow, who said that he's like watched him like warm up against guys like Gigi Jackson and just like destroyed them in workouts and stuff like that. And Gigi is like a draft sicko darling as well. So I don't know why he couldn't go in a draft like this.
I think he definitely could. I think where I'm struggling with him is he feels so theoretical to me. Like he just feels so far away. Like I look at the like stretch big shooters who couldn't really dribble from last year's class, like your Taylor Hendrickses, your Noah Clowneys and whatever. And like they got some Mickey Mouse March run, but like none of those guys made an immediate impact of like any sort. Like they all feel really far away. And I feel like in comparison, Jarin Stevenson is like so far behind where those guys were as far as like rebounding, defensive technique, even like ball handling. Like his handle, I thought like really got away from him at times. Like I was not pleased with that. I think he's really weak. So it's like, and the shot too is still like a little theoretical to a degree, like sub 70% at the line, 31%, like good numbers for a guy his size and his age. But it's also one of those things where like it's not a certainty that he shoots, and then if he does, it's like, all right, well then he's still got to get downhill, he's still got to get better at rebounding, he's still got to get stronger. Like
I think the rebounding's good. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think the rebounding is actually like pretty solid.
Okay. Like, yeah. I just like in like the assist to turnover numbers, like I just don't.
Yeah, he's not a very good processor right now. I'm not like saying like draft this guy and put him as like
for sure
a playmaker or anything. You're taking him in a range where 3-and-D.
You're taking him in a range where a lot of guys like don't pan out anyway. So it becomes a game of like pick your poison. Who do we want to take the patience to develop? And I understand being like a 6'10" guy that can like shoot and move. Like I think there's like far worse gambles you can make in that range. I just think to me, Stevenson feels like a guy who's so much more likely, like if he does end up ever returning value, it's probably going to be for somebody else. Like I don't see the vision with him yet. Is it this year guy in the film that I've seen? But I think there's like worse guys. You know what I mean? Like at the same time, I'm like, yeah,
sure, yeah.
I think there's like more, like definitely like unreasonable decision making. And again, I think it's also going to come down to like how teams view this draft in terms of like, I think if a team is picking in the second, they're like, we think these guys stink and we think Jarin Stevenson is a pro at some point. So like, let's just take him and then wait it out. And we know it's going to take 2-3 years. Like you're going to have a real degree of patience with him just based on how it's been for like these other shooting forward kind of guys.
Yeah. And you and I both subscribe to like most of these guys are going to work out, but you still want to do the best that you can, right? Like you want to draft as if these guys will end up being something at some point, you know, that way you can get your Manu Ginobili, your Draymond Green, your Nikola Jokic, you know, Cinderella stories and stuff like that, right? But I agree with you. Like one thing that I have been told whenever I was talking to people about Jarin Stevenson is that he could benefit from another year at college. But my argument to that is everyone pretty much outside that top 10 could benefit from another year at college, right? So then it goes down to like what range you think that they're going to be selected. And again, like Jarin, the thing that gives me encouragement is progress through the season, A to B, where he started the season, where he ended the season. The fact that he was even seeing minutes for Alabama, like especially tournament, like postseason minutes, like as the season progressed on a very senior laden team, to me that speaks to like how much Coach Oates values him and the potential and his contributions that he does give. I buy the rebounding. I like the defensive upside with him. and the shooting did get better as the season went on. So I see it. I think that obviously, yes, he could benefit from another year. I just think that I don't see the negative side of taking him within the second round. And again, like, biggest riser isn't me saying draft this guy lottery. It's like, I'm not considering drafting him at all. I might actually invest like a middle of second round pick, and that's a significant jump for me. So, and I think that he's one of these types of prospects to where it might be cool to get out in front of this conversation, because obviously NBA teams are seeing a lot of the same things because he's being invited to combines right now. So teams are interested in seeing what he can do. And I think in an open gym setting, like you versus me, I think that he might be able to impress some teams, man.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely on the table for him. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into some guys higher up the board in our sort of, explain it to me kind of segment here. So stick with us. You'll be right back. All right. So this is going to be the help me out portion of the show, where we are going to talk about guys that maybe we have some discrepancies on as far as where they're ranked on our boards. You have a new number one on your board.
Yeah.
It's Nikola Topic. I have him. So just to be completely frank, 2 through 9 is 1 tier for me right now.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think my tier is like, I think it's like 6 through 14 is like all a tier. So I can definitely see where you would see that the number isn't as indicative as to like where you value them.
So I currently have, and I want to like preface this as much as possible. I have Topic.
Big caveat.
I have Topic at 9, with the caveat being that like his season is still ongoing. So that's almost more putting him there as a placeholder and just kind of like seeing what he looks like post injury, playing better competition in Red Stars EuroLeague games. Like, this is more me saying I'm just kind of waiting this out more than anything else. Like, I'm not saying I have him like 9th permanently and he can't move up. I've not had him at 1 at any point this year. I know a lot of smart people that have people on our team have had him there. I think people on our team currently have him there. I think the passing is like wizardrous. I love how he pressures the rim. I think he's like an outlier feel offensive creator. I just really struggle with a guard where I don't know if I trust the shot, and I truly don't trust the defense. And this has been behind the no ceilings plus paywall for a long time now, so I think it's okay to say it publicly. Corey got the scoop a while back that the reported 7-foot wingspan is not 7 foot, and allegedly it's much closer to 6'6". So with that being the case, it's just like, I don't know that he has the same margin for error defensively, or that like I feel as good about him on that end of the floor. So you've got him at 1. Like, just talk me through it. Like, what makes you feel like, hey, I know this is a guard who can't, I don't want to say can't shoot. It's not like he's like 24%. He's at 31.3 across all of his leagues and a good free throw shooter. But you're definitely betting on some things going right. What are you seeing with him at 1?
So the big thing for me, and I was a big skeptic on the shot as well, right? And I'm still pumped. I'm still kind of promoting my piece while I'm saying this, but I did a piece on how important shooting is when taking players for number 1 overall. And in that piece, I discovered that the averages of those players who were taken number 1 was around 33%. And like, that's the average. So guys like Anthony Edwards shot beneath 29%, right? There were some guys like Markelle Fultz and, Cade Cunningham, who were the best shooters, and now they are kind of like around league average. Well, Cade is, not so much Markelle. But in looking at players who were taken number 1, it wasn't so much as like what they shot from deep during their pre-draft year. And this included, I even did like, okay, not just number 1 picks, but who are the best players within their classes as well. So that this include like Luka and Jokic as well. The shooting from deep wasn't as much of a concern for teams taking players number 1. It was outlier athleticism and outlier processing, right? And even though Topic isn't like a genetic freak athletically, and he might be a net zero wingspan guy, he does have positional size. like a Cade Cunningham did for his draft, right? And one thing that I found in my research is that these guys also get better as shooters, right? Like by year 3 to 5, the biggest pool of players within my research all average about 35%. So it's not so much as like we need this guy to be a lights out 3-point shooter. It's what do they bring to the table? And for me, Nikola Topic brings, like you said, like the passing is wizard. This I think is like the correct pronunciation. Excuse me there, right? He sees the floor incredibly well. He does have positional size. He is very aggressive with the ball in his hands. He puts a heck of a he puts so much pressure. The guy is still going to be 18 on draft night.
True.
He gets to the rim regularly. He finishes with both hands. He's not just like a one side, one hand dominant guy. He's the fact that this guy is seeing minutes on his top club right now and is getting better at the top club after injury, I think speaks to like the fact that he's actually good, because European teams aren't incentivized for playing young guys. You know what I mean? Because it affects like where they rank in their standings, like all of those things, right? So the fact that back to the 3-point shooting, the free throw percentage has been what has mattered and what has translated. And for past number 1 picks, they average somewhere between 75 to 76% from the free throw line. Topic is somewhere between like 86 to 89% from the free throw line. So the touch is there, right? I buy the shot. I buy the ability to get to the rim. I buy the ability to see the defense incredibly well. And even though he's probably not going to be, I don't know, like a Markelle Fultz on the defensive end or anything like that, I think the size, and he will get stronger, right? Like the guy is still 18 years old. He's going to be introduced to American weightlifting and athleticism training and stuff like that. He's going to get better on that end. So in my opinion, if I'm looking at everything else kind of like as it is, and like the areas of concern that I do have that they will get better, I am much more comfortable taking a guy like Nikola Topic, number 1, today than I was prior to going in and doing that research.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just going to come down to me to like doing a final film dive on the shot once we get through these like final few games for him pre-draft. The finishing, like you mentioned, is outstanding. I actually think he's like a better athlete than people realize. Like he is really good at like just exploding from a standstill or exploding out of like a side to side, like crossover dribble, and then just turning on the Jets forward. Like he's really good with directional, like shiftiness, I guess is how I would phrase it.
Yeah.
I think his touch is exceptional. Like I believe someone in the chat mentioned like the floater game, and like that's really good. But like even when he has these really suboptimal rim angles, he's really good at still getting the shot to fall. And his like coordination really shows at the rim. Like he's one of those guys who can really contort and finish. Like Derrick Rose is always a guy I think about with that, like peak Derrick Rose's ability to just like move through the air and like wiggle around guys at the rim. Like Topic has some of that. He's not the leaper that Derrick Rose was, but he's really good at just like avoiding. He plays through contact a lot. Like he hits the free throw line a ton, but he is really good at just like shifting his body through space. Another thing that's like a lot of people have mentioned recently is that like a really good indicator of future shooting is just like, did you take a lot of threes? And Topic has never been a guy where it's like, he's never been shy from a volume standpoint. Like the games where he takes 1 or 2 threes are the games that he's playing for Red Star. He's playing under 22 minutes. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like for the most part, he's not afraid to shoot. And I think that has some real value too. If you were to like put a gun to my head and be like, you got to rank him somewhere. And you know, you can't, do this cowardly put him at 9 for now thing. I probably put him like at least around 6 or so. Okay. The floor is just really scary for me still. And maybe I need to get over that. But I just have a hard time with like a guy that we're looking at where like the shooting is a flaw and the defense is a flaw. And we're counting on him to be a very on-ball player.
And I totally get that, right? And I see people in the comments and like some people criticize the research, and that's okay, right? Like this is kind of like the help me out segment where you and I, like we disagree on there. Clearly people in the chat disagree as well. That's fine, right? Like there are people that love him. There are people that don't. He's very polarizing, right? And I get the concerns. Like I'm not sitting here and saying like, oh, the fact that he can't shoot, that's actually a good thing. I love picking a player that has poor shooting percentages and things like that, Like obviously you would prefer him to be closer to like league average, right? But a lot of the players, whether they were the top picks or whether they rose above their draft status, right? Like, and they proved to be the best ones. They didn't have great shooting metrics. Like, and that's just something that happens, right? Like every one of them, like in the top ones, the ones that had the highest percentages are kind of oddly like the lower end percentage shooters in the NBA right now. It's just something that I noticed. So the fact that like NBA teams are getting these guys who have outlier abilities and developing them as shooters, I think that means something, right? Like that's a data point, right? And that's what I'm going off of. And I like the way that he sees the floor. I like the way that he keeps his teammates involved. He gets to the rim, whether he's, shaped like a right angle or he looks like, he's made of jello. I don't know. Like he doesn't look the part as a lot of other players that do the things that you want a number one pick to do, right? But he's still creative. He still gets to where he wants to go. He has incredible touch and he sees the floor incredibly well. I trust that the shooting is going to get better. That's why he is kind of my number one pick now. Whereas you could have told me this like 2 weeks ago, asked me like, hey, Steven, you're going to have him number one. I'd be like, you're crazy. No way at all.
Yeah. So let's get to my guard that I also think like looks funky and throws people off. I am like a Reed Sheppard holdout. I still have Reed Sheppard at 2. So talk me through your concerns with Reed Sheppard, and I will tell you why I'm still like, this is another one where like I'm probably gonna like ultimately move him down a little bit, just because I think like the value proposition of a guard that high is like dicey, and like especially like when we're looking at actual team fit. But I still love Reed Sheppard. So yeah, ask away.
So at the expense of making it sound like I'm trying to tear him down, I love he is, I think he is number 8 or 9 on my board, right? Which is lower than where a lot of people have him, but I still really like him. He's still in that, 6 to 12 range where I could swap a lot of guys. Like I'm still going back and forth on a lot of them. I just can't take him number 5 overall. I read your small guard piece, Maxwell, and that was phenomenal work. And one of the things that you pointed out that was a big indicator of success for small guards is wingspan. And we just got done picking apart Nikola Topic's wingspan, right?
Yeah.
Reed Sheppard, kind of the same thing. I've tried to find a wingspan from him. Everything that I've seen is that it's
any non-combine wingspan, by the way. Like I know that I know we're like, oh, it was like this is the pro day, and it's like I don't know. Like I don't know. I'm gonna prefer to wait to the combine and adjust from there.
Yeah, it doesn't look big, and everything that I have seen so far suggests that. So that kind of concerns me. And the wingspan stuff kind of shows on the film, and it's really hard to look at Reed Sheppard's analytics and like the production that he had at Kentucky and try to find something wrong with him. And there's going to be people that are going to turn me off just because I'm picking at the size, but I think it shows in the film. I think that he doesn't employ a lot of counters, right? Like look at what Brunson, and I know not every sub 6'4" guard is going to get compared to Jaylon Brunson. I'm just not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
But Brunson employs multiple counters, right, to get to where he wants to go. And I don't see Reed do that. There's a lot of like one read stuff that Reed Sheppard does that I am concerned with. And he didn't necessarily have to do it a lot because Kentucky had multiple guards that could put pressure on the defender. And I think that kind of helps him out, right? A lot of his, like he does a lot of jump passes, and I think that's almost like a necessity thing because of the size and because of the wingspan. And I don't know how that scales up because a lot of the plays that we're looking at in the playoffs now are like a game of inches. Like there's lobs that are getting like just over a defender's fingertips right now in the playoffs, and it's being counted as like one of the most crucial plays in a series, right? But that concerns me. One bit of data that I want to point out here that really scared me. And actually, I like him and I like Rob. I actually have Rob Dillingham ranked ahead of Reed. But the thing that scares me is that per Bart Torvik, everyone's favorite opening, per Bart Torvik, only 36 players, which dates back to 2008, at his listed height being about 6'3", have ever been drafted in the top 60 with a free throw rate of 24 or lower. Yeah. Only 12 have been drafted in the top 30 with a free throw rate at 24 or lower. And only 4 have been drafted in the top 10, 0 in the top 5. And those 4 are Steph Curry, Davion Mitchell, Buddy Hield, and Jimmer Fredette.
Yep.
That scares me a lot, man. And again, at the expense of not trying to sound like I'm tearing Reed down, I still really, really like him. You and I, Maxwell, have talked about short guards for a long time. And it's like the more research that I find into these guys, no matter how productive they are, no matter what like signs that they show, prior to getting into the NBA, it's just a super hard transition. And it's not that I don't like him, but seeing where you had him at 2, I'm like, man, that's super bold. That's like, I don't think that I could do that,
Yeah. I think this is a class where we are betting on a lot of players that were not very productive. And I think that Reed Sheppard is one of the few guys who was outlier great in a few areas. Yeah. And like, I think that is meaningful. Like, I really think that means quite a bit. The rim pressure thing is a problem. Like, he's not a guy that touches the paint a whole lot. But he's not a bad finisher. Like, he makes the shots when he does get to the basket. I think that he does a good job of contorting, getting around guys. I actually think when he's downhill, I actually think his counters are okay. Like, I really like his crossover a lot. Where I worry about him, like you touched on the jump pass thing. And then my other thing is like when teams play more aggressive ball screen coverage, like he doesn't really do anything against it. It's more just like, I'm going to just pass off the ball.
Yeah.
This question from Honey Badger. How much would it change your mind if I told you he'd be a 37% shooter instead of 38, 39? Like, I don't like these kind of hypotheticals very much because it's like, well, what if I told you that the best player in this draft class is going to be Clarence Daniels? You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's like, well, that's like, well, what if I told you, like, what if I told you the future?
Everything.
Yeah, of course it would change, like, my perception of him. Like, that's not what we do. And, like, I don't mean to go after you.
I would say it would depend on the volume. Yeah, too. Like, what if he was a 37 3% shooter but shot 500 threes as opposed to a 38% three-point shooter that shot 350? Like, that would change a lot,
Yeah. Am I banking on
no.
Plus percent? I don't think so, but like at the same time, like he had an outlier great effective field goal percentage. He was an outlier great 3-point shooter. The volume was solid, like it wasn't terrible, but he shot 52% from 3. He was great on pull-ups, great off the catch, showed NBA range. And like we're in this league that just increasingly values spacing and shooting. And I feel like at the same time, if we're pushing him too far down boards, like I think we're being a little silly. Like, I think it's being a little bit ridiculous to be like, oh yeah, we just saw this guy shoot like 52%, like from 3 over a whole season. But like, there's some other stuff that's not so great. Like, to me, it's like, this is an outlier. Like, we need to really appreciate the fact that this guy had an outlier great season as a 3-point shooter, even if he's a little bit small. And I'm curious about the defense because I do think that there are places where it was an issue. Like the potency of his closeouts is always going to be limited. There's always going to be bigger guys that are going to be able to push him around. Like sometimes he has a really hard time recovering if he gets beat just between like the lack of speed, the lack of burst. Like it's tough. He needs to be tighter with his footwork, which like I found that to be the most frustrating because I thought sometimes his defensive footwork was a little bit lax and it's like, buddy, you're playing like 25 minutes a game. Like you can't be doing that. I also think he does try to give a second and third effort at all times. He's exceptionally pesky with his hands. He's an outrageous ball tracker. Like he moves his hands otherworldly fast. It reminds me of Anthony Black last year where like guys would throw a pass and like he just like snapped, like just immediately get his hands in the way of the ball when it seemed completely impossible. Awesome timing and passing lanes. Pretty good ground coverage, honestly, for a guy his size. Like I think I look at guys like Mike Conley, or even like Kyle Lowry to an extent where it's like later in their careers where it's like the physical tools at this point aren't outrageous, but they have enough like power, IQ, whatever, to just like hang and like still be good and be important, good defenders. Like I think Reed can be that. I think the passing feels like really great. He was a good rebounder. I just think in a class where like a lot of guys stunk and we're being like, well, actually when the role changes, maybe they'll be good. Like, why don't we just look at the guy who made 52% of his threes and acknowledge that like, hey, this guy's an exceptional shooter who has a really high level of feel. And even if he's short, he defends his tail off for his position and he's this super reliable table setter. Like maybe that guy's just better than them. And like maybe because it doesn't look right because he's like a 6'2" kid with this Corey put it a leave it to Beaver haircut. Like maybe we need to just like put that aside and look at what he produced and say like actually this guy's really good. I think his floor is actually frighteningly safe too. Because like I like and again, I know people are gonna be like, what about the Oakland game? I watched back the Oakland game and people killed him defensively in that game. And there were some times where like he was a little slow off the ball.
Worst problem.
Like he was a little bit slow off the ball. The guys that Jack Goldke was lighting up for the most part were actually their other guys. It was a lot of Antonio Reeves. It was a lot of Rob Dillingham. Yep. Like, did Reed Sheppard have some plays where he didn't guard his way around ball screens or recover to him quickly enough? Yes, but it wasn't like this disastrous defensive performance that I think people were making it out to be. It wasn't great. It was probably one of his worst defensive performances of the season, but it wasn't terrible.
And he didn't have bad game. Like, if you're going to say that you're going to put a lot of weight on that just because it was like his March Madness game.
Yeah, his one bad game.
Yeah, it was just like his one bad game. And Maxwell called this lazy scouting. And I understand it because I hate being the guy that just says, look at history. But I think history tells us a lot. It's just super hard, man. Like I feel like, you know, we've banged our chests on so many guards in the past. You know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah.
And it's just hard, right? And I do look at, again, I can't look at 52% from three and tell you that's a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not like trying to sit here and tell you that that's bad. I just look at like, okay, what were his struggle points? Like, what were the things that he did get hung up on? I feel like a lot of those are going to get magnified at the next level, right? And you can apply that same thing to every other prospect, but it's just way more of an uphill battle to climb. And I put a lot of stock into the research that you did, man. And like the wingspan thing is, if it comes out that he's scary, like a +4 wingspan, if he comes out he's a +4 wingspan guy, it probably helps my evaluation out a lot. I just see like what he, like parts of his game that he has to do the things that he does. And it kind of worries me how it translates up at the next level. You know what I mean? And like, those are just things that stand out to me. And again, like the free throw rate success thing was interesting. Yeah, like even Steph Curry wasn't taken in the top 5 in his outlier year in a good draft. You know what I mean, with Blake Griffin. So I see the things that have concerns and red flags. And again, I still love him. I'm not gonna take that guy top 3. You know,
I get it. I completely get it. I'm not going to fault anybody with a difference of opinion on that one. Live show formatting question. Do you want to push the transfer segment to next week and just focus on these next 2 guys?
Yeah, because I know that we got stuff coming up. Yeah, sure. We can push transfer stuff for sure.
Let's do that.
All right, so let's get to my next guy.
Yes, let's do a quick break first. We got to pay the bills around here, and then we're going to talk about your guy because I'm fascinated for this one too. So stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, awesome. So your guy, I'm going to be completely frank. I
know you hate him.
I don't hate him. I wouldn't say I hate him. I am putting
off. Don't like him at all.
I have personal issues with him. No, I've actually been putting off my film dive because this is a guy that I kind of didn't see it with all year. And I want to go in as like clear-headed as possible. Like I want to almost try to forget some of my stances on him before I go into my dive, because there are some like really interesting things on paper, and he feels like the kind of guy that I typically like, and he appeals to some of my sensibilities. But I just never like got it, like quote unquote, with him. Carlton Carrington, Bub Carrington from Pitt. You have him pretty. Where was it that you ended up with him on your board?
25 as of today. He's 25,
which I think is probably like a relatively popular range. I've been like not checking out a lot of other boards, but I feel like that's reasonable. Like if you told me that, like I wouldn't be shocked. Like if that's where he goes on draft night, or even a little bit higher. Talk me through it, because with Carrington, the issues that I have were like, I just saw like what happened to Jaylon Hood-Schifino, and like I like not.
You saw Jaylon Hood-Schifino this year?
Well, yeah, here and there. But to me, like I look at a guy who is like a skinnier version of that, where it's like this is an extremely on-ball player, And I know the pull-up numbers are good. But my thing is always like, okay, well then is an NBA team going to trust him to play with the ball right away? Probably not. And I think like there's a huge just physical barrier for him. And I know that he's one of the youngest players in the class, but I think like physically you're not going to be able to put him on the floor right away. So let's say you don't. Let's say you play him in the G League. Is that going to make him any better of an off-ball player playing in the G League? Is the fact that he's like really bad defensively going to get any better in the G League? Like I just have a hard time like picturing the developmental path that gets him to like good production on the contract of the team that drafts him. And like, he never gets to the rim. Like he's a tough shot maker who doesn't provide off ball value and can't defend and is like physically way behind the curve. So like, he's just not a guy I've enjoyed. What are you seeing that like makes you say, yeah, you know, depending on the situation, I would draft this guy in the first?
Yeah, so I think what helps me out with him being in that range is that there are a number of teams that late in the first round have multiple picks. And I think that, let me ask you a question. Yeah. Does it matter to you where you rank a player if they commit 100% to the draft or if they just say that they're testing the waters? Do you feel like you have to like try harder to nail down a range for someone who is 100% committed?
I think subconsciously it affects me. Yeah, I think subconsciously, like if I'm just being completely honest, I think when I make my boards, if I think a guy's going back, I tend to rank them lower.
Yeah, I think that's a totally normal thing based on people who I talk to about scouting. And one, the fact that like Bub is 100% into the draft, it did weigh into like, okay, like 6'5", 18-year-old guard who has pretty good feel. The handle is not Kyrie Irving, right? And I know that's a straw man, right? But he doesn't have like the top handle in this draft. Like I think Hunter Silas could probably challenge him for in the handle department, right? And I love Hunter Silas, by the way. But 18-year-old 6'5" guard with relative good feel, who's very poised with the ball in his hand, in my opinion, can get to his spots easily. And the Tylers did a great job talking about this on their last show. That the defense did get better as the year went on. Like if you watch like the later in the season film, the defense does improve, which to me is a good indicator. You kind of want to have an upward trajectory and things, right? As you approach. My thing is like trying to rationalize this out is, did I expect Bub Carrington to do much of anything at all this year? Like coming into the year? No.
Yeah.
And he started the season off as like one of the hottest prospects, like looked like the top freshman in this entire class, right? So I feel like that was almost a curse for him because that was the expectation. Okay, like you're opening up, grabbing triple doubles. Let's see how you do this all through the rest of the year. And he struggled, like most freshmen do whenever they're not like on a very deep team. And I look and see what he was able to do at his size. I love the feel. I think that he does get to his spots relatively easy. I think that he does display nice touch. And again, NBA teams, they typically improve people who have good touch, their three-point shots. And I think that you see that.
Volume is crazy for him too. 11 attempts per 100.
11 attempts per 100. He's in the 85th percentile in the mid-range. He's in the 83rd percentile on dribble jumpers on 250 possessions, Maxwell. That's insane, right? So 18-year-old 6'5" guard. And like, I get the desire to compare him to Jalen Hood-Schifino, but do we really want to say, well, because a rookie on a LeBron James team didn't have a good season, like that's the standard that we want to hold him to? Because like typically rookies don't do well on a LeBron James led team, you know what I mean? So I feel like there's stuff in his game that NBA front offices are going to look at, especially with multiple second or first round picks, and say, I'm going to take the guy.
Yeah. I just have such a hard time, like with how little he gets into the paint, I think. Cause like he got to the rim like way less than even like Reed Sheppard did. So it's like, he's got to be really, really shooting the ball. And And yeah, like good point here. Like this is the one thing I like have been wanting to keep an open mind on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we both had the same thing at the same time. It's a really good point here. I think Bubba's probably a better 3-point shooter than the numbers indicate. Yeah, shot 50% from mid range, self-created on a lot of his shots. I think one thing that I've like been telling myself that I want to be like, more charitable with regard to when I do go do my film dive on him is like he kind of had to be on the ball. Like because if you look at the rest of that pit roster, like who else was going to create?
No one.
Like Jalen Lowe is like the only guy on that team that I would be like, you go set somebody else up.
They
like,
did get Ishmael Leggett.
And like, but even like Leggett's like more of a scorer. Blake Hinson doesn't pass very much. Like the Grahams are like fine, but they're more play finishers. Federico is not a guy who passes. Zach Austin doesn't pass. Like there's like he was better this year, but like he's not like a creator. He's a play finisher. Like he was on a roster of play finishers basically, other than Jalen Lowe. So it's like I kind of have to like go back with the mindset of like maybe it's not that he's like unwilling to be an off-ball player or incapable of it. It's just like this was not the roster for that.
I think that's totally fair too. And the thing that I go back and this is what I'm telling myself is, did he exceed the expectations that I had for him coming into the year? Yes, absolutely. Did he hold true to the meteoric rise that he had at the beginning of the year? No. So like truth might be somewhere in the middle, but even still, I think that there's value in his skill set, his size, and his feel to be had in the back half of the first round. And the guy is 100% committing to the draft too. So I'm like putting myself in the minds of front offices, like why not? You know what I mean? Like why would I not want to take this guy with multiple picks in the first round?
Yeah, I just think like the shot has to be like awesome if he's not gonna.
I agree. I think
like it's got to be really good. And like I just don't know based on where he's at athletically and strength wise, like that he's ever above board defensively. Unless like the wingspan is crazy, which it might be. Like this is like we've mentioned before, like the measurements this year are going to be so much more important than most years. Yeah, like that's going to be an interesting one. And just to see like what he looks like, because we talked again, like this is like a super young guy. It's like this is a guy too that like might put on a lot of muscle a lot more faster than a lot of other guys. So
and a lot of these dudes that I'm big on, I think strength like fixes a lot of issues, and he's super young. I think he's is he going to still be 18 on draft night?
He is, I believe so. Yeah. He's one of the younger guys in the class.
Exactly. So I mean, that's not something to turn away, because you and I, Maxwell, we both value strength. Strength is an outlier thing that helps with success in the NBA. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't have it, but I think that it's reasonable to assume that he will put on strength at the NBA.
For sure. Do you want to throw to my final guy here?
Yeah, let's talk about your guy. Your guy that you have is probably one of the most polarizing prospects within the no ceiling circle, man. G League Ignite prospect Modest Buzelis.
Yeah, so I've got Modest at 4 right now, and I don't see myself like moving Modest outside of the top 7. Like I really buy Modest. So throw your concerns my way.
Okay. I get the appeal of him. First off, I think that the size, the fluidity, the jumper looks like it should go in. I like his ball skill. I like his mentality. He's not afraid, even though he's probably a little bit more sleight of frame than I would like for his player type. He's not really afraid to attack the defense. He's just, I don't know what the right word is, but I don't feel him when I watch Ignite basketball. You know what I mean? Like, and I know he has an impact on the game, but I don't feel him. Like, he has big time ghost factor to me. The shot just like never ever goes in. He's in the 8th percentile in unguarded jumpers, and like y'all just tore me apart for Nikola Topic. Like,
yeah.
Modest shot the 8th percentile on left alone. Hey, go ahead and shoot, buddy. Jumpers, the 8th percentile. He was in the 15th percentile on all jumpers, and then the 14th on catch and shoots. I do think that the strength is an issue. But I do like the fact that he goes to the rim. Like, despite his strength, he did get 12 and 1s in the G League. He got 6 double-doubles, even though that number should be higher. He did only get 5 dunks but he does drive on 33% of his possession, so that he does have that aggressiveness in his game. For all the ball skill that he has, and for like all of this hype that we had coming into the season that he was going to be Hidu Turkoglu. He's got 1.9 assists on the season, 2.1 turnovers. So that's like a less than 1 assist turnover ratio. Defensively, I don't know who he defends. I could see him taking on a more stagnant guy. I think that his length keeps him in plays, but I do see him give up on a lot of possessions. Like his recovery efforts are very lacking in a lot of games. I don't like his rotations. I know that he had like a really good defensive outing against like the Perth, versus Perth. And he's had a few moments like here or there, but I don't think that the defense has been consistent. And I want to ask you this too, and I'll flip it over to you.
Mm-hmm.
For all the talent that the Ignite has had, right? Let's throw some names in here. Jalen Green was a top talent. Like, dude was supposed to be the second coming of Kobe Bryant. Jonathan Kuminga was a top guy. Jalen Hardy was a top 5 guy for a lot of people. Scoot was like one of the best point guard prospects that we've seen in like a decade. And like none of them like were setting the world on fire in the G League Ignite. And a lot of them like aren't on the schedule that they were supposed to be when they came in. Like, and Buzelis is struggling like worse than a lot of those guys were.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't see how he's going to be the guy to buck the trend. You know what I mean? Like, that's my concern.
So let's address that first, and then I want to address the defense because I actually like love him defensively. Okay. So with regard to Ignite, I don't think there has ever been a worse Ignite roster. Like, I think the prospects, by and large, kind of stunk. I think they had too many of them. They did not have a traditional table-setting point guard until they got Norris Cole. They didn't have a rim protector. Like, these guys were thrown to the wolves. Like, these guys were straight up just not put in a position to succeed, unfortunately, this season. And, like, injuries made it worse. And Modest was injured this year. Modest played through injury.
Yeah.
I think that Modest is, like, a really great team defender. Like, he had, if you look at the numbers, ended, like, I think the full season, he had a block rate of 5.6, which is like the best that we've like seen from like one of the Ignite forward kind of guys. He really knows where to go, like weak side. Like, he is an excellent weak side rim protector. Can really jump, like see stuff, covers ground, gets there, boom, take shots away from people. Yeah, like Flash is playing weak side, like Honey Badger said. I'm right there with him. I actually think he got quite a bit stronger too. Is something that I talked to Kristen Peak about when she was on the show. Like, his body is filled out really well, even through injury.
You can see it in pictures, like from the beginning of the year to the like the more later ones throughout the year. It really stands out.
Yeah, I think it was like Mason Jones in a game I watched early in the year, just like pushed him out of the way. And like Mason Jones is like a strong dude. Like, Mason Jones is a guy who like his physicality has always been like something that's very much in his corner, and like just like pushed him out of the way. And then later in the year, I watched him play. Yeah. He's strong. Fellow weight loss guy, Mason Jones. So I've always like pulled for him because he was like, I think he was like 280 pounds or something in high school, and now he's like 225. So like I always root for those guys.
I love him.
Yeah. He, by the end of the year, I watched him play Windy City Bulls in person, and like Henry Drell, who's like a pretty big guy, like he was walling him off. Like, he was keeping him out of the paint, like keeping him out of the restricted area, like doing a really good job of throwing his body on people. Like, I think he got quite a bit stronger. I think he can guard a variety of positions, and I think that he has the instincts to like be a really impactful off-ball defender. Like, I see some like Denny Avdia in his game on that front, where it's like, does the strength need to keep coming along? Yes, but like just a smart guy who knows how to play and gets places and makes things happen. Offensively, I'm quite a bit more concerned. Like, I am very curious as to what the shot actually is, because like I don't have confidence evaluating a shot. The gather footwork is like kind of wonky and inconsistent.
It looks like it should be better. Like the up top portions of his mechanic, like it shouldn't be outlierly bad.
When it was shocking too that he made 35% of his guarded threes and 22% of his unguarded threes, which is like, is that just like a mental thing? He made 6.7% of his pull-up threes, but then you look at his mid-range pull-ups and like he's got a mid-range bag, and like this nice mid-range pull-up gamer made 47.4% of his mid-range shots. Is that like a strength thing maybe? Like, is that something where like his body's just got to keep coming along so that he can?
I think that's a comfortability
further
thing.
away. Like, what is that? I don't know.
I think that's him getting to spots that he's like. So my thing with Modest is like he's been that dude like everywhere he's gone, right? And I think that the G League has allowed him to kind of dip into like, let me get in that mid post, lull you to sleep, and rise up above you. Like, to me, those aren't the shots that I think that he's going to get at the next level, right? And that's kind of like what concerns me.
Yeah. So that's a little weird. Is this the turnover thing? I'm not super hung up on. I think the turnovers I did like a deep dive on when I wrote my article about him, because like it's not processing. Like the turnover stuff isn't that he doesn't know what he's doing. A lot of it was strength. A lot of it was being a little too sped up. And again, that turns into that, like, was that him being nervous because it's his pre-draft season? Is that like a more deeper underlying mental thing where like he just is a little too quick and needs to slow himself down? Is that something you can get over? I don't know. But a lot of them are physicality based, and as he got stronger, that kind of started to go away. So I think that's something that can be improved upon. But I don't think he's very advanced as like a floor reader. Like, I think it's pretty just basic.
He's not Hugo Turco,
which I do think. Yeah, he's not. But I think it would have looked better if he was on a team where like other guys made shots too. Like if there were other shooters or like a reliable lob target or something like that.
But that's like the thing that we've said about the Ignite since its inception. You know, like they're just...
This team stunk, though. Like, I know that that's like true,
yes,
but it's like this team was so much worse than some of the past iterations that, like, I do think it deserves like extra special consideration this
year. You're right, and I could see like why after this season they're like, you know what, like maybe we shouldn't just do this anymore. You know, like I don't know. Do you think he's really 6'10"?
Yeah, I do. I think he's at least like 6'9", and I also think he competes really hard on the glass. Like something that I've liked about him with regard to a lot of players is that like he plays really hard. Like I do think that he's a good bad game player, because even when the shots don't go in, like he's cutting, he's trying to get to the basket, he's getting to the free throw line, even if the free throw percentage isn't great either. He's rebounding. Like he does make a big impact on the glass. Like I just think that there's a variety of ways for him to impact the games.
He gets like, I think, under 4 rebounds per game too, though. Like,
it ended up being pretty good. So down the stretch, his rebound percentage ended up being around like 18 or 19. So they rated out, like, even if you grade his rebounding percentages on a college scale, they were solid. So the fact that he was doing that on a G League team, I think, is encouraging. And like the shot blocking like down the stretch was stellar. Like I think he was the best like wing/forward shot blocker in G League this year. So I really like where he's at defensively. I have like questions about the offense, but I think guys that are that big and just like sort of know how to play and play hard generally stick. So I think like his floor is like a guy who plays. Like I don't think he's gonna.
Is that what you want to take at number 4 though?
No,
like, that's my only thing.
But I think is like you look at like the I think Denny is like the guy that I'm like viewing him through the lens of, which is like if he can just become a solid 3-point shooter, like all of a sudden you have a guy who's super valuable.
And he was like 9th in a good draft, I think, right? Like
yeah.
So I don't know, man. Like the defensive thing, like that's where you and I are on different pages, because like if his help side's good, is he a 4 in the NBA? And if so,
I think he's
like,
a 4. Yeah,
I don't think he's got the strength to hold up. You know,
that's reasonable. Yeah, I don't think that's like out of the question. I think against certain teams it'll be more of a problem, but I think generally it's going to be fine.
Yeah, and like super big caveat, I think it's going to be team dependent. I don't think that he's like incapable of working. Like there are some people that are like way out on Modest. Like I have him like in the, where do I have him? I think I have him like 12. So like not a super popular ranking either, right? Like you have him way higher than a lot of people. I have him pretty low compared to where a lot of other people have him too. So maybe the middle ground is probably more correct, but I don't know, man. Like I have a lot of concerns offensively. I have strength concerns, and that's where I'm a little bit less optimistic. But like I said, I get the appeal. Like if he really is 6'10", I don't think that he plays that way, but I don't know. That's just where you and I are a little bit worlds apart.
He was purported to be a stubby wingspan guy too. Like he's one of those guys where it's not like 6'10", 7'3" wingspan. I think it's like a 6'10", 6'10", like boxy. Like you could turn him on his side and he's the same height kind of situation.
He's a starfish.
Yeah.
So I think so. Yeah, man, like we can wrap up the modest talk. Like, I think it's good though that we do this because it makes me want to have to go back and look again, especially at the defense. Like with you and I being this far apart, I'm like, okay, what am I missing? Let me go back and check it out.
For sure. Yeah, I love doing these exercises. Like, this is one of my favorite things to do, to try and like get a gauge for where I might be missing some things. So let's wrap it up. We've got a player interview with someone who's going to be in the first round on our board, consensus board. Hey. So I've got to get that going. But we appreciate us tuning in. Stephen, what do you have coming out this week?
Yeah, man. So I did an interview with Chaz Lanier, who is testing the waters. And has entered the transfer portal. I was able to talk to him, kind of get his thoughts on this season. Like, big time prospect out of North Florida.
Big time dunks and threes guy. Yeah.
Big dunks and threes guy. 6'4", around 200 pounds. Like, if you don't know him, get to know him. You're probably going to know him one way or the other, regardless on what he decides to do. But interview with him, pod drops on Tuesday. Article drops out on Thursday. And I'm also working on a piece, moves I like, moves I question. For No Ceilings Plus, for all of our Plus subscribers, I'm going to give you 10 moves that I like, 10 moves that I have questions. Doesn't mean that they can't work out. It's just that there are a few obstacles that I think need to be overcome. And that should be coming out on Plus sometime, maybe next week, maybe the week after. But yeah, No Ceilings, NBA.com for all your needs. There's going to be a lot of player interviews churning out over the next coming days. We got big boards coming out very soon. Mock drafts once the order is set coming soon. Yeah, tell your friends, man. And again, if you're here, hit that like button, please. I see we got a lot of people in the chat. Love that. Please just help other people be able to find the show and hit that like button.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tomorrow, I've got a piece coming out on Jalen Bridges. Friday, I'm going to have a piece coming out on Pell Larson. And then we're cooking something up for Monday as well. We might have some other stuff in the works. It's a busy time. We've got a Wesley Cardette interview dropping Tuesday as well. He's another guy who's testing the water. Is going to be at Providence if he does decide to return to school. So a lot of activity over here. So make sure you're subscribed to the No Ceilings NBA Substack. Make sure you're subscribed to our podcast feed, YouTube channel, all that. Hit that like button. Follow Stephen on Twitter /X at Stephen G Hoops. Follow me at Boundbards. Follow No Ceilings NBA. And we will see you all next week.
Much love, y'all.